spune că noaptea este un sfetnic bun, dar asta doar dacă reușești să te odihnești bine noaptea. În ultima vreme, din ce în ce mai mulți oameni ne-au spus că nu pot dormi bine, că somnul lor nu mai este la fel de odihnitor, ori că suferă de insomnie. Dacă ai petrecut o noapte de nesomn, deși ai încercat din răzputeri să te odihnești, dacă somnul tău nu mai este la fel de odihnitor sau suferi de insomnie, ori cunoști pe cineva apropiat ție care are probleme cu somnul, cu siguranță ai întrebat ce te ține treaz noaptea. Colega noastră de la Societatea Omului Sănătos, Olga Udrea, psihoterapeut și fondator al Mind Initiative, încearcă să găsească cele mai bune răspunsuri la această întrebare, alături de doctorul Alex Dimitriu din Bay Area, Silicon Valley. Alex Dimitriu este psihiatru și specialist în medicina somnului, școlit la Stanford și recunoscut de cele mai prestigioase outleturi media din Statele Unite, precum The New York Times, NBC News, ca fiind unul dintre specialiștii de vârf în psihiatrie și domeniul medicinei somnului. Urmărește conversația dintre Alex și Olga pentru a afla ce te ține treaz noaptea și pentru a afla care este legătura între o dimineață bună și un somn odihnitor. Vizionare plăcută!
So hello, Alex. Thank you for joining our conversations at Habits. It is a pleasure to have you here with us. I know that in your work as a psychiatrist, you are supporting your clients in a holistic manner, looking at the complex interplay between the mind and the body. More further, I know you advocate for sleep to be considered a vital sign, along with pulse and blood pressure, recorded at every visit to indicate our general state of health. How come you see sleep so important?
That's a very good question, and thank you so much for having me on your show. It's great to be here, and I love to talk about sleep and psychiatry. And in many ways, my very own interest in that field is probably the answer that I think you're looking for. But for me, what we do during the day has so much impact on how we sleep at night, and how we sleep at night has so much impact on how we do during the day, that to me, it's almost like a yin and yang relationship between how we sleep at night and how we function during the day. And truly, by optimizing both, we're able to make people whole. And the goal in everything that we do here in my practice and in a lot of the publications that I've put out, it's really an emphasis on treating the whole person with a focus on the daytime symptoms as well as the nighttime symptoms. But I think sleep is really a superpower that we all have, that we all don't use enough. Sleep has so many restorative qualities. It can prolong our lifespan. It can make us smarter. It can make us more fit with better skin and more happiness during the day. And I think so many people these days are very busy watching the right diet, exercising and doing other sorts of healthy things, but sleep is so easy to neglect. And it's so important to remember the importance of sleep.
I have in mind a Romanian saying that sounds like ziua bună se cunoaște de dimineață. In translation, it would sound in English like you can recognize a good day by how the morning unfolds. And I was wondering, by what you said previously, whether we can apply it to sleep, this yin and yang relationship.
It's a good question. I think for a lot of people, generally speaking, it's a good rule for most people. But I would say that there's easily 1/3 of people, maybe even more, for whom that might not be true. I think that there's people, depending on whether you're a night owl or a morning type, depending on how much sleep you've gotten, depending on if you've taken any medications before bed, there's some people that might actually wake up feeling groggy in the morning and then go on to have a totally normal day. On the contrary, there's also people that wake up very early, perhaps earlier than they want to, with lots of energy, but then they're exhausted by like 10 a.m. in the morning. Certainly it's important to see how you feel when you wake up, and ideally if all the sleep hygiene rules are followed and people are well rested, they will be waking up at a regular time on their own without an alarm is the ideal. But I think there's also a large proportion of people that will still need an alarm to wake up, and there's people that might be tired for the first hour that they wake up. They'll need coffee. to kind of get going and to wake up and to be fully alert. Now, for those people, I don't think they necessarily woke up feeling great. I think some people wish they could keep sleeping, or they were still tired in the morning. One of the gauges that I like to use for how rested people are is how you feel in the afternoon. I think everybody knows about at the siesta time, right? The 3 p.m., 2 p.m. dip in energy and motivation and fatigue that usually comes on there. To me, that time in the afternoon is almost like the canary in the coal mine. This is an American saying where it's like, it tells you early. It's an early marker of how you're doing overall. And I think it's normal for everybody to get a little sleepy in the afternoon. But if you're sleep deprived, if you're not well rested, and if the quality of your night's sleep was not good, irrespective of how you felt in the morning, that some people get really tired in the afternoon. And that is to me is a more important marker even than how you feel in the morning. So to answer your question, the morning is important, but to me, if you're falling asleep at your desk at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that to me is more important than how you felt when you woke up.
So that's a lifelong relationship, the day and night.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, it keeps going, I think. And I think also that, a lot of people try to determine the quality of their night's sleep by how they felt immediately upon waking up. Mm-hmm. And that might not be true for everybody. I should also tell you that they've done these interesting studies where they've completely randomized people. They've given them watches to wear that tell them how they slept. And it was completely random. It had no relationship at all to how they slept. But people that were told they slept poorly felt poorly all day. And people that were told they slept great tended to feel great all day. So I think it's very important, the ideas that you start in the morning with. And if your first idea is, oh my God, I'm so tired, this is going to be terrible, you should be careful, because that has some chance of coloring the rest of the day.
So Alex, let's deep dive into our sleep architecture. Can you tell us more how each sleep phase of our sleep cycle influences our cognition, executive function in general? Totally.
So the way I see it, there's basically 3 types of sleep. There's light sleep, then there's REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement sleep, which is dream sleep. You can tell it's dream sleep because people's eyes are moving behind their closed eyelids. And then there's deep sleep. Deep sleep is what you tend to get first when you fall asleep in the beginning of the night. During deep sleep, that you could tell someone's in deep sleep because their breathing is regular and they're not moving much at all. So each of these phases has a significant role for the brain. Deep sleep is believed to actually clean the brain up of a lot of toxins and metabolic byproducts that accumulate during the day. And they've shown that the same biomarkers that are present in people with dementia start to appear in the brains of people that are sleep deprived. And deep sleep is the stage where the brain really does a very deep cleaning. It's such a deep cleaning that you cannot be awake for this process. And a lot of times people aren't even dreaming during this process. So that's deep sleep. During deep sleep also, we form memories. Your brain during deep sleep will take different facts and different data that you learn during the day, and it'll slowly put that information away into long-term storage. And it will also make room for new things to be learned. So deep sleep is really all about memory. And again, it's not a hard and fast rule, but there's a lot of memory encoding that happens in deep sleep, and a lot of pathways that are getting reinforced so that memories can be offloaded and you can learn new things the next day. They've done experiments where they had people sleep at night. Well, I'm sorry, they had people learn word pairs. So you memorize this list of word pairs, cat, house, dog, car, and so on. The more deep sleep people got, the more of those word pairs they remembered in the morning. So deep sleep is all about memory, roughly speaking. REM sleep is about more emotional processing. Deep sleep is almost like, now that the facts are taken care of in deep sleep, in REM sleep, now we start kind of working with emotions. Mm-hmm. Some people have said that in REM sleep, it's almost like your brain is testing out loose hypotheses and looking for new ideas. So there's a lot of creativity that can come up during REM sleep. And this is also why dreams are very fantastical. Dreams are dreamy, right? Dreams are always a little strange. But you might also realize that during a lot of the dreams that you experience, there's also a bit of emotional content. And what your brain is doing, it's almost like fine-tuning your emotional system during REM sleep. So REM sleep is important for creativity, emotional processing, And also, they believe in REM sleep. Your brain is actually rehearsing things sometimes for the next day. It's processing how you should act, what you should do. And again, these are rough generalizations because there is some overlap between deep sleep and REM sleep. But generally speaking, the way I see it, deep sleep is more about data and REM sleep is more about feelings and creativity. And we need both of them to be whole people.
Thank you for making that differentiation between the three. It sounds for me like a theater play. You can have a front play without a back stage. Fatigue, by no means, might be the word of the year. A lot of my clients bring this in our sessions. A lot of friends and family mention fatigue. I experienced myself. We talk globally, we talk a lot about burnout and fatigue in health workers. But there is not always fatigue means sleepiness. So can you say more about the difference between the two?
So that is the most important question I think that I answer almost all day long. And it's great that everybody's thinking about it, because I have to tell you, there's different things that are going on. Fatigue, there's really three things that I'm always going to be thinking about. So we should all distinguish fatigue from sleepiness. That's a very important distinction to make. And the question I'll always ask my patients, if you say you're fatigued, this means, Olga, if we gave you a bed right now, could you fall asleep? Right? To me, so that's sleepiness. Sleepiness differs from fatigue because sleepiness, people will fall asleep if given the chance to do so. Fatigue is you can be tired and low energy, but that doesn't necessarily mean you want to sleep. I'll give you an example. I have patients that I work with that have anxiety, and they feel fatigue all day long, but they cannot sleep. If you take a person with anxiety and you tell them take a nap, even though they'll tell you that they're tired, they will not be able to nap. So I think it's important to distinguish fatigue from essentially hypersomnia, which is a fancy medical word for sleepiness. But a lot of people mix them up. And I think it's important to realize in the afternoons at 3 p.m., if you're yawning, are you tired or are you actually, or do you actually want to sleep? And a lot of times, a very important question that I'll ask my patients is, can you nap? Because there's people that cannot nap, no matter how hard they try. And there's nothing wrong with them. It just means that they're kind of too awake. Now, these people can still be fatigued, but they are certainly not sleepy because they cannot sleep if allowed to do so. The other thing that's important to assess, so now that we can distinguish between fatigue and sleepiness, if we know that it's not sleepiness, fatigue deserves a further exploration. Lots of things can give you fatigue, including dehydration, including medical issues. Thyroid problems can give you fatigue. And more common in my line of work, fatigue can be caused by depression. Fatigue can also be caused by anxiety. And I think it's important at some point, at least to answer the depression question, what I'll often see with respect to fatigue is that people with depression will say, you'll ask them, do you want to go to dinner with your family? Do you want to go to the gym? Do you want to go to the beach? And they'll say, I really don't care to do that. Somebody that's not depressed, on the other hand, will tell you, I want to go to dinner, I want to go to the gym, and I want to go to the beach, but I'm too tired to do it. And so that's another important differentiator. I think when you're looking at fatigue, there's the difference of desire and ability. Usually depressed people that are fatigued won't even have the desire, or the desire will be very mixed, versus people that are just tired, burned out, overworked, stressed, they'll still have a desire to do fun things. They just won't necessarily have the energy to do so.
So what do you think we should fix or ameliorate first? Anxiety and depression or sleep? What do you think?
Sleep always. I'm a naturalist in that regard. I think it's important to start with the very basic things. And I think before people start doing any kind of creative, outlandish sort of solution, it's important to fix sleep. Perhaps I think even more important than to fix diet. And certainly if someone's having, suicidal thoughts, or somebody's having, like they're hopeless and they're crying every day, by all means, that's depression. Get help. Anxiety is a bit more of a complicated question because the question is how much is too much and how much, when is it not right? But that's another question.
there was an incredible rise of insomnia, right? So we talked about fatigue and sleepiness. Insomnia, well, that's a different thing. And my colleagues and I see it in our practice. Surveys in Romania are indicating an alarming increase of people suffering from insomnia, and the numbers are high. So is it a work from home syndrome, or what do you think is happening?
If the numbers are rising during COVID, I would not be surprised. My explanation for this is, I call it home office syndrome. And I had this diagnosis before we even had COVID. But home office syndrome is what happens when people work at home. Working at home tends to blur the boundaries, the distinctions between work and play. So it turns out very easily, if you're working from home, that it's very easy to end up working randomly during the day, relaxing randomly during the day, and at the end of the day have a feeling that you never really fully worked and you never fully really relaxed. So that loss of boundaries is terrible for sleep, because sleep and wake are another very important boundary. And what happens when people are at home is that the morning, the wake up times get variable, the bed times get variable, people end up working later into the evening. And even if you're not working right until bedtime, working into the evening later keeps your mind more active. We all need downtime. We all need time to sit there and stare at our phones for a little bit. We all need time to call our friend. We all need time to go outside and walk the dog. When work goes too late, all those behaviors get pushed later too. So with the blurring of the boundary between work and play, you also have, I think, a blurring of the boundary between sleep and wake. And it's no surprise that people developed insomnia. Sleep really benefits from rhythm and structure. And as soon as that rhythm or structure are lost, as in the case of working from home and exacerbated by COVID right now, it gets increasingly harder to get good sleep when we're ready for it.
So Alex, can you tell me, in your practice, when do you consider a person can be diagnosed with insomnia?
So, we look at insomnia as basically trouble, falling asleep, maintaining sleep, or waking too early. That happens on more days than not. By the textbook definition, I think it's a 3-month span of time. Mm-hmm. That's a long time to wait to make a formal diagnosis. Yeah. I think oftentimes you could tell quite easily that somebody has insomnia. Oftentimes you could tell that somebody has insomnia sooner than 3 months. But a lot of times people will come in and by the time people get help, they've often been suffering for a while, several months often. And other people don't even realize there's something wrong. They think that this is just how they are and how they sleep. And it's only until it starts affecting their lives that they realize it's a problem. But a very big and important factor in determining insomnia, as well as anything else psychiatric, is really the impact that it has on people's daily life quality. I think depression, anxiety, insomnia it's a problem when it becomes a problem. The biggest issue, I think, is a lot of people are kind of tough and they don't want to admit that it's a problem, and they don't get help.
On a simple search on the internet, we can find headlines such as, what successful people are doing while you're sleeping in. So all these articles write about super early morning routines of famous people, CEOs, executives, leaders. I remember years ago, I was reading an article about Condoleezza Rice, former US Secretary of State, about her morning routine, waking up at 4:30 a.m. Recently, I've read that about Tim Cook from Apple. Around me, more and more people are aiming for a 5 a.m. routine. So my question for you has in mind, on one hand, our models, the one we aspire to, and on the other hand, this emotionally, psychological oscillation between people feeling a sort of sleep shaming themselves, or sleep anxiety in their strive for performance, success. What's your view on this?
So many things in there. The first of which, I want to say that, to anybody, I think sleep is important when it's not forced. When people put too much pressure on sleep, it tends to get worse. What I often use here in my office, I'll often use these finger traps. Mm-hmm. And I use these as an example to show people the problem with sleep. You stick your fingers in here, and the harder you try to pull on this thing, the more your fingers get trapped. And the way you get out of one of these things is if you actually try to push more slowly, and then you can come out. Sleep is very much like that. I think when people really obsess about sleep and worry about sleep and get stressed out about sleep, sleep becomes worse. It gets harder to fall asleep. They wake up more often. It increases the overall anxiety level and stresses people out. So I think before anybody says, I have to follow this sleep schedule or something like that, I think it's more important to just kind of like, just take the pressure off sleep and create a good, healthy opportunity to sleep 8 hours. I think there's something very important about the term opportunity for sleep, by the way. Opportunity for sleep means if you have an opportunity to sleep for 9 hours, that means that there's a 9-hour period of time where you're laying quietly in bed. Maybe you were reading before, but if you were to fall asleep, you'd be okay to sleep. But you're giving it space for 8 to 9 hours. So I think the healthy thing is to create a window of sleep, 8, 9 hours, maybe even 7 for some people. So I think it's important for people to take the pressure off of falling asleep. And inevitably, people with insomnia have been shown to think about sleep 10 times more during the day than people that don't have insomnia. Now, which comes first, the stress about sleep and then comes the insomnia, or does the insomnia cause stress about sleep? We don't know. But what can you control? You can control how much you obsess about sleep during the day. And you can also control how much time you allow for sleep to occur. So certainly I'm a big fan of letting people sleep naturally. And, whether people are morning types or night owls, the answer is mixed, because they've done experiments, for example, on teenage students in high school, where if you allow those teenagers to sleep later in the morning, they do better on their test performance, their moods are better, and they have less suicidal thinking as well. So for teenagers, for example, the right answer is not to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. They do better when you let them sleep later. For adults, inevitably, I think, many successful adults are very disciplined. And the question is, are you waking up at 5 a.m. because you're disciplined, or are you disciplined because you're waking up at 5 a.m.? And to be honest with you, I think most people that choose to wake up early are probably able to do so. Number one, because they have a lot of structure to their day, and they've gone to bed at a proper time. Maybe what sets apart successful people from the others might be their ability to stick to a schedule and maintain routine. And maybe applied to sleep, that certainly lets them go to bed when they choose and wake up when they choose. And for a lot of business types, I can tell you, waking up early, if you can get enough sleep, waking up early is useful for 2 reasons. Number one, the office tends to be very quiet in the morning. There's no emails yet, and nobody's calling you, and there's fewer interruptions usually before 9 a.m. The other thing that happens, I think, before 9 a.m. was something I read that was very interesting, but they said if you wake up and you choose to work on something before you've read any text messages, emails, or listened to any messages, phone calls, your mind is pure. All that thinking that your brain did at night is ready to go before it gets polluted by the goals and the requests of others. So I think it works 2 ways. I think certainly the discipline helps, and the ability to get enough sleep and still wake up early requires discipline. But also I think that there's a certain purity to working in the morning that I think many people want to experience. Though just as easily, some people may experience that undisturbed time later in the day or in the evening.
I think a lot of teenagers will be happy with what you've mentioned to us just now.
Yeah, that's been the biggest thing. Yeah, absolutely. And it's so sad to see that as kids go later through school, the biological tendency is always for kids to sleep later as teenagers. They're not lazy. That's just biology. And maybe this goes back to our times of being cavemen, but we were wired so that when we start entering our reproductive years, we want to stay up later at night. Why that happens, I have no idea, but it does. And to tell those people that now you have to wake up earlier for school completely goes against biology, and it's shown in test scores as well.
So we mentioned anxiety and depression until now. And if we think about racing brains or poor time management or impulsivity, all these aspects that might have the tendency to keep us up late at night. So these might be signs of ADHD for some people, as well in the same time, a sleep deprived person can also look like they have the symptoms or the signs of ADHD. Are there any solutions for sleep deprivation besides the prescribed drugs?
I mean, so you raised some very great points actually there. I have seen, so with my training at Stanford, I've seen children that were like 9 years old that would come in with terrible ADHD. We would look in their throat and we would find that they have these giant tonsils in the back of their throat. These are kids that would like sleep fitfully, tossing and turning all night. Some kids would still be wetting their beds. Certain kids would be on stimulants already, Adderall, Ritalin, to be treated for ADHD. When the tonsils came out and when the kid got sleeping better, within 2-3 months, they didn't need stimulants anymore. So sleep and, as you mentioned, cognition and impulse control are very closely related. The other thing I wanted to point out, our impulse control tends to diminish as the day goes on. As we get more tired, we get a little bit more impulsive. And that again speaks to the importance of sleep. It also tells you why humans tend to do everything in excess in the evening, not in the morning. People that have binge eating disorders, that eat too much, people that have alcohol problems, people that have any type of issue that you can possibly think of, it tends to get worse in the evenings as people get more tired. And that happens because we lose impulse control as we get tired. And a lot of these behaviors, I'll often say it's almost the impaired impulse control that makes it harder to fall back asleep. Because along with drinking too much, eating too much, there's scrolling on your phone too much and not being able to put it down when it's time to get sleep. Again, because you're disinhibited, you're tired, and it's just harder to be disciplined at that hour. And the problem then becomes that people that don't sleep enough are more reactive and do more things that result in them not sleeping enough.
A brief advice for people watching our conversation. When should someone seek specialized professional help for sleep-related issues?
In the words of Dr. Bill Dement, sleepiness is red alert. So I think anytime somebody is noticing that they're pretty sleepy during the day, and that by that we mean it's like you have you would go to bed if you could. That's already a sign, a fairly big sign. The other issue I think is whenever somebody has, if you have issues with low mood, if you have issues with anxiety, if you have trouble remembering things and focusing, so many times people come and see me because they think they have dementia early, and it's like, no, you just don't sleep enough. So that's another very important thing to check, because I think anybody that's experiencing any cognitive issues or thinks they have really bad ADHD, which they may not have had before, I think it's important to look at sleep. And I think also for anybody that wakes up too many times during the night, anyone under the age of 60 shouldn't be waking 3 times a night to use the bathroom. And anybody that has a partner that's noticed that they have pauses in their breathing at night, which is apnea, not episodes of not breathing and snoring. Those are usually reasons to start and get seen by a doctor.
Quite important mentioning, thank you. And my last question is related to the wonderful Alan Watts quote that you use when referring to the human mind. Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. Could you explain a bit this metaphor for us?
That's a wonderful line. So Alan Watts is a brilliant philosopher, and the quote is something to the effect of like, the human mind is like muddy water, leave it alone, it will settle itself. And I think that speaks to the tremendous natural built-in abilities that we have that are almost derailed by our own brains. Phones, light bulbs, emails, internet, like all these things we've created have completely gone against our biology. And I think it's so important to realize that I think the human beings, any living organism is just like this amazing nano machine that we can't even build ourselves, and we're very lucky if we can even try to immunize or intervene with. And I think that these marvelous systems oftentimes do very well when just left alone. The problem is that the society we've built because of our minds and the speed of life these days can completely disable the body's natural ability to do what it does best. And there's actually studies where they've shown that people with insomnia, when they go camping for 3 or 4 days, they end up doing much better after some time. And that's because you're in natural light, you're active during the day. You make a fire by 6 p.m., by 7 p.m. it's getting dark, and by 9 p.m. it's cold and dark, so you're going to sleep. So I think that the human body is very able to take very good care of itself. The problem is that we've evolved into a society that's sort of outpaced our biology. We have more inboxes, more demands, and we're doing things that we were not wired to do for the 200,000 years that we've been on this earth. This has all happened in basically the past 50 years, if not the past 20 years, and it's accelerating. And the answer, I think, a lot of the times is to actually say no to things, turn things off, and come back to nature. And that means both the outdoors and ourselves. And I think so many times we just need time to think about things. There was a time before phones where you would walk to your car and you would think about the conversation that you just had. And now we're all so busy all day that the only time we have to think is at night, once we finally put the phone away. And that is why there's insomnia, partly, I think, because people haven't had time to process a lot of things. They haven't left their mind alone until it's bedtime. And then your mind wants to think a little bit. So yeah, I think we've just outpaced our biology. And the more we can come back to natural things, our own rhythms, hopefully in a way that can still work with our work demands and our society, I think the healthier we would be. And that's where, for me, I advocate for everybody. Everyone should exercise regularly. Exercise, sleep, and meditate are the 3 big things that I'll always advise. Meditation is important too, because it's literally the process of letting thoughts go. And I think everybody's terrible at meditation in the beginning. And the answer is you were terrible when you learned how to drive too, and you haven't stopped. You've kept practicing, and now you got better. Everyone's terrible when they meditate in the beginning. That's no reason to stop. And it's so important, I think, to be able to quiet the mind by giving it the space to do what it needs to do.
For our community, walking is a key helper with sleep.
Absolutely.
Good walk before we sleep.
I think it's also, for people, it's important to be vertical during the day. I'll often say this, a lot of people spend their whole day like laying around on the couch, in the bed. You want to walking, get out, exercise, look at the sun, these are all things that help sleep.
And what I take from you, Alex, is the permission that we should give our body to work in its own rhythm and natural functions. A great permission that we should remember. Yeah,
I think both for our health and our sleep, it's so important to create space. The problem is our lives have gotten cluttered, and there's just too many things going on, and there's just no space to be, and there's no space to sleep. And I think we need to be very vigilant and and really fight for that space. And part of that is I tell my own patients here, sometimes it's saying no to things. A lot of times for everybody in our busy society, I think it's important to learn to say no more, because we all say yes too much, and then there's no time for anything.
And yes to our body.
Yes, and our sleep.
Thank you. And
my pleasure.
That was it.
Cool.
Thank you.
So that was awesome, guys.
Thank you. Thank you for
bravo, guys.
Vă mulțumim că ne-ați urmărit, sperăm că v-a fost de folos ceea ce ați auzit și vă invităm în comunitatea noastră, Societatea Omului Sănătos.